Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar with MetaSearch, Pros and Cons of Assisted Booking Programs. My name is Dean Schmidt. I'm the Sales Operations Manager here at Derbysoft, and I'll be taking you through our webinar today. Before we start, just to review a little bit on some of the topics and content that we have covered so far in this webinar series. Last week, we spoke just generally about what MetaSearch is, what it does, why it matters. Today, of course, talking about assisted booking. And in the weeks to come, also talking about budgeting for MetaSearch, as well as the roles of rate parity, both seen and unseen. So today, assisted booking. Within this, we're going to talk a little bit about how it all began. Where did this whole assisted booking thing come from? As well as some of the advantages and disadvantages. And of course, we'll give some examples as we go through here. So having said that, let's go into the history part of things. In the beginning, well, maybe not quite that far back, but in recent years at the very least, the way a lot of this started came actually from mobile. So go back a couple of years ago, and TripAdvisor in particular, they weren't necessarily the first company to invent assisted booking, but they're really one of the big ones that people think of today with their instant book platform, and they're also one of the ones that really got it to take off, got it going. And so what they discovered a couple of years ago when they were looking at their MetaSearch campaigns is that on the mobile channels, when people would click through, they would end up with what we refer to as the visual thud. They would have these websites that were not optimized for the mobile booking process. Either they were confusing, you weren't sure which way to go, they had too many steps, they weren't appealing, whatever the case may be, and conversions weren't very good. So TripAdvisor had the idea. Some kid sitting around one day said, hey, you know what? I think we could build a better mobile optimized booking engine. And so he presented it to a bunch of guys and said, hey, let's do this and let's see what happens with the conversion rates once we do so. And they did. And lo and behold, we ended up with screens that looked something like this. So as I search for a hotel on my mobile phone, I get a quick snapshot of that hotel's information, some very easy booking choices, and I can, through a mobile optimized site, make that reservation. Fantastic. And it worked. It was very effective. Their mobile campaign conversions went up, their business went up, everybody was happy. So as that started taking place, they got to thinking about that and said, hey, you know, why don't we start doing this with some of our desktop booking processes when it comes to MetaSearch? Because we run into the same problem where we can't control, we being TripAdvisor, can't control what happens to that user after they leave our site. And sometimes the consumer wants to stay within the site. So in this example, we see the Omni Royal Orleans here having different booking options that include the property direct, but right on the bottom of those three, the top three here, it says TripAdvisor with Booking.com. That's one of what we call the TripAdvisor instant book links, as it would appear on your desktop page. I click on that, I'm given some very simple room choices that I can select from, and I click on one of those and I'm taken directly into where I'm giving you my name. We refer to this as click, click, book. Within 2 clicks, I'm to that part where I'm giving you my information, and that's so very important. We'll talk about that again here a little bit later on in the presentation. Now, this has started to work very well, of course, for TripAdvisor. And with that being the case, Google, of course, was not far behind. So within Google, we have a slightly different variation. So when we have this particular hotel, the Cheyenne Mountain Resort, and we see their booking option, in this example, as a consumer, I don't actually know that this is going to go anywhere other than the hotel directly. But in this case, when I click on that, I'm taken to a page where I could, in fact, go to the hotel if I wanted to, but more likely than not, I see my dates, I see my rate, I see the button, I click on that to book it, and I'm giving you my name. Notice that trend again, click, click, book. Remember that, we'll talk about it more. So a very efficient booking process that takes us through that sales cycle, gets us to where we're placing the reservation. So again, we found that it worked very well within Google. And there are a number of other travel sites out there that have or are in the process of adapting it as well. For today's webinar, we're going to talk primarily about TripAdvisor and Google, since for this audience, those will be the primary ones that everybody is looking at. So having said that, let's look at a little bit of a comparison between the two booking options, instant book options that happen on these different sites. So TripAdvisor refers to theirs as instant booking. Google refers to theirs as Book on Google, or BOG for short. Both of them are what we call an assisted booking engine, meaning that they're facilitating the booking process, although the reservation itself is fulfilled by whatever source that's going to. Maybe it's booking.com, maybe it's the hotel direct, whatever the case may be. Now, something that's important to realize, that's a difference between an OTA booking and an assisted booking reservation, is that with assisted booking, you do still get all of the guest data. You get their name, their email address, and anything else that is filled in as part of that booking process that is passed on to you. Whereas booking through, for example, Expedia, let's say, that reservation comes to you and they own the guest data. So there is one advantage to that over an OTA. Now, within these two booking options here, if we look at the TripAdvisor version of it, you'll notice that, in fact, there are two different points of sale showing both booking.com. One of these, the bottom one, is the instant book or assisted booking model we're talking about. The other one is the CPC, or cost per click model, actually what we refer to as managed CPC. TripAdvisor allows you to actually participate in both of those. And that can be an advantage to you because, as a hotel, or OTA in this case, it allows you to have two different point of sale options. Why are two options good? Well, one, because there's two of them, right? So more is better. Also because, keeping in mind that with your negotiations with TripAdvisor on that instant book, you're negotiating that as a percentage commission. Depending upon what that amount is, it will determine what your percentage of visibility is. So let's say that you have 50% rotation. So 50% of the time, your link is going to come up there as an instant book option. Well, that also means that 50% of the time, it is not coming up there. So it's important to have a secondary listing, your managed CPC, that can also represent your booking option as one of the choices. Now, by way of comparison, when I go over here to Google, I only get to have one point of sale. In this case, it's the Cheyenne Mountain Resort. So we have one link, one listing, and we don't get to play in both an assisted booking model as well as a CPC model. It has to be one or the other. But it's not quite that simple. It is a little bit more complex than that. So within Google, you have the difference between their business models and their booking models. I emphasize this, and you'll understand why here in just a moment. So within their business models, we have their managed CPC, such as what we talked about in TripAdvisor, or you can have a commission that you pay to them for your consumed reservation. With that, of course, they have to include their pixel tracking on the booking process and so on. So you have either one of those options. Within their booking models, you can have that go to your brand direct website, or you can use the book on Google. So in both these cases, it's an either or, and that ends up giving you a graph or a chart that looks kind of like this. I could use their cost per click bidding model and direct it to my brand direct, or send it to my book on Google. I could also be a part of their commission program and likewise send that to brand direct, or take that over to book on Google. Now, it's important to realize that when we talk about a commission model on any of these channels, that a commission model is going to also impact some of your visibility based upon how often are they going to be getting the bookings off of there. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of the assisted booking models and how those play out. So first of all, the advantages. One of the key advantages of assisted booking is that they do tend to have a higher conversion rate. Now, why is that? Let's look at a couple of examples. One of them being, there tends to be a lack of responsive design in booking engines. Internet booking engines were primarily designed for website visitors, people that started at your hotel.com website and have been going through that booking process, that sales cycle, and have already been enveloped into the world that is your hotel. And also, for that matter, although it's not necessarily happening on a mobile device, it is a mobile mentality when we talk about metasearch bookings. You notice what Google and TripAdvisor were doing with their own booking sites. You saw that click, book method that they installed as part of getting the most efficient sales cycle possible, getting you to that part where you're filling in your information as quickly as possible. So let's look at some examples. First one here coming from Hilton, the New York Hilton Midtown here. I find their hotel ad coming up. I click on the book button, which, after all, if I click on the book button, I want to do one thing, right? I want to book a reservation. So that can be an important part of that philosophy. I click on that, I get my room choices, I click on one of those, and I'm giving you my name. click, click, book. Now, of course, there are 2 more steps to go through this process, but getting that information, getting to that stage is absolutely critical. Now let's look at another example of one that's not optimized for Meta specifically, although it has a very good website, very good booking engine, just not from a Meta perspective. And of course, we've hidden the names to, to protect the innocent, if you will. But in this example, we see the hotel listing. So I click on that. I get to the booking engine. Now, immediately, one of the challenges here is a question of where do I go for my next step? My instinct is to click on that button that's colored up there kind of at the top. But in fact, I need to go down here to the bottom right and click on that button. Once I've clicked on that, I get these options. Oh, okay, so trip protection. Well, yeah, trip protection could be nice. Oh, a bottle of wine in the room, a romantic dinner, upgrading the room types, all of these different options, which especially if I'm planning a romantic stay with my wife or somebody, hey, I may want to start thinking about that and go, hey, honey, do we need dinner included with this? Or whatever the case may be. I've interrupted that spontaneity now. And metasearch is a very spontaneous booking process. After that, it does finally get to the part where I'm filling in the name and that information. But again, it's important to understand that it's a very mobile mentality, as we talked about earlier. So that talks about where, again, we have higher conversion rates oftentimes that do come off of the assisted booking models. And of course, they are mobile optimized. That's really kind of where their origin story comes from, is within that mobile category. Also, the fact that they can be paid as a commission versus the cost per click, whether it be TripAdvisor or Google. And that can have some advantages to you, especially if you're thinking in terms of, hey, how is this being paid for? What sort of budgets is it coming off? What department is it coming out of? And so on. They are largely plug and play, meaning that you get it set up and you can let it go. You just set up and say, this is what my commission is, and I don't have to manage any campaigns. And not having that campaign management can make it easy. Well, we'll talk about that here in just a second. So when to use it? Well, let's face it. Changing up your internet booking engine is not something that happens overnight. You can't just completely revamp your booking engine, and that may not be easy. So it may be advantageous to allow one of the assisted booking models to do that in a manner that is optimized for the meta search mindset, if you will. The mobile component that we talked about earlier is certainly an important part of that. I do not have a budget. So let's think about that. We're coming into that time period right now where we're looking ahead to 2017 and thinking, what are my budgets going to be for these different programs in the new year? Or even maybe looking at the remainder of 2016 and you're going, you know what? I don't have a line item budget for metasearch. Or there's a debate over what department it's supposed to come out of. By the way, we'll have an entire webinar to dedicate to this exact subject. But this can be one of those solutions to that, in the fact that if you're treating it as a commissionable reservation, then it's really no different than paying a travel agency commission, and it comes out of that same reservations or revenue management budget, if you will. And so that can be helpful to you in that regard. Or it needs to be easy. Now, I put the asterisk behind that part of it because there are some qualifications when I say that, because you have to keep in mind that in order for instant booking or Book on Google or any other of these channels to do their assisted booking model, they still have to get that information to you. That means they're passing guest data, the name, address, phone number, email address, maybe even a credit card. That means that you need to make sure that you're working with somebody that is a PCI certified or PCI compliant certified vendor with the channel in question. There is a certification process they have to go through so that data can get to you. So it's not quite as easy as it may sound. That's a critical component. But once you have all those pieces in place, again, you don't have to manage a campaign. And managing a campaign can be difficult. There are a lot of steps to go into that. There's a lot of goals to consider and understanding what your objectives are and a lot of different ways to achieve those goals. Okay, so having said that, let's talk about what are some of the disadvantages. Well, probably the primary one here is giving up some of that control. With any of these metasearch channels, as we start putting together the commission part of that, they generate what they refer to as an effective cost per click. Meaning if they get a booking that they're getting commission on, they're going to reverse engineer that and figure out, okay, so what did that work out to as a cost per click? And so that works it out backwards from the revenue that they got, backwards through the conversion rate, backwards through the click-through rate, backwards through the impressions and so on. And now you're competing against the other people that are bidding for that same cost per click spot. Of course, rate parity plays a role in that and many other factors, but that's a key component of determining some of that positioning. So when we think about that and we look at our two hotels we talked about earlier, let's say I'm the Cheyenne Mountain Resort and I say, you know what, I want to be in one of those top 2 spots there. However, if my conversion rate or revenue and those numbers aren't panning out well enough to get me that effective CPC that I need in order to achieve that, I may be outsourcing those bookings essentially to the booking.com and hotel.coms of the world. Same thing can be said with the TripAdvisor example. Now, in this example, though, you do have a countermeasure in the fact that you have the ability to have both that instant book and your managed CPC. So if the bottom one here, where it says TripAdvisor with Priceline, if that was not coming up on there, I could still have one of the other options coming up on top. Now, important to realize that that means that effectively you've got a less real estate to work with in those top 3 places. And so if you are not being aggressive in a managed CPC program there, that can result in your brand direct site actually not even coming up in the top 3, maybe even not in the immediate extended listings. So important to be aware that of the importance of having both of those programs with TripAdvisor. All right, so we talked about giving up control. We talked about the effective CPC, leading, of course, then to that less visibility. We do find that the managed CPC programs are the ones that usually win the positioning. Google has told us outright that in more cases than not, the managed programs are going to win. Not just owning, but truly embracing the guest. Okay, now I said earlier, of course, that with a booking that comes from an assisted booking platform, you get that guest data. It is passed along to you, and that's very important. That is one thing that sets it apart from an OTA booking. However, there's a difference between that versus actually bringing that guest into your environment. Now, again, I talked about earlier the importance of having a streamlined booking process. That doesn't mean that I don't want to upgrade them or that I don't want to offer amenities and different things like that. It means I want to get the booking first. But now once I have them in my environment, I do want to take advantage of them being there and use that time, use that opportunity to show them and showcase other things that are happening at my property. If I'm a resort, maybe I'm talking about water sports. If I'm a city center hotel, maybe I'm talking about my restaurant. Whatever the case may be, there's that opportunity to bring them in and, for lack of a better term, wrap my arms around them and embrace them and owning that guest throughout the entirety of that process. And then there's the topic of outsourcing your bookings. Now, I've been working in hospitality for quite some time, close to 20 years, and I remember right after 9/11, one of the things that happened is we all kind of sold our souls to the devil, if you will, and we went to a lot of the different OTA sites and we said, please, please book rooms for me, fill my hotel rooms because I'm at low occupancy, I need you to fill these up. And we really gave up everything we could to get them to do that. And then we spent the better part of a decade and more trying to get all of that back. So by that same scope and that same concept, I look at a lot of these hotels that are giving up that control to the assisted booking models and thinking, boy, what happens when they want to start taking that back and taking ownership of that back again? I personally believe that you should keep it to begin with. So when not to use, let's face it, one size does not fit all. So there's different reasons for different hotels and different clients to do different things. That's completely understandable. But one of the first things I look at is if I'm already getting a double-digit plus conversion rate on my own internet booking engine from meta channels, I should be taking those bookings directly. There's no reason other than the 2 points of sale on TripAdvisor, but generally speaking, there's no reason why I shouldn't be doing that through managed CPC and getting that traffic coming to my website. Which relates to the second point here. I want to own my branded search terms. That's a meta search goal in general, but that also speaks in terms of making sure that you have the ability to control that placement and you're getting that link traffic coming into your site. As an SEO manager, if anybody's listening, you'll understand the importance of the link traffic. Maybe I just want to get more volume, more visibility. I want to have higher number of clicks, more traffic, more visibility. I want people to see my hotel. And I not only want to own the guest, but I have a specific marketing plan intended to maximize this. That's really important because we hear a lot of people talk about owning the guest data, and that sounds really good and really cool. But what are you going to do with it? Do you have a plan? Do you have a program in place to actually put that into action and do something with it? That's an important element, really, of any marketing campaign. Last but not least, I want control. That really sums it up, and that kind of alludes to the last slide here. In the end, it is a question of, do I want to be in control and have the ability to push and pull where I see fit, or do I want to relinquish some of that control and allow that to be taken over by the other side? I joke about that a little bit, but I want to also be clear that there are very legitimate reasons going both ways, whether it's to have that control or not to have that control. Sometimes it's a matter of using that assisted booking model just to get into the metasearch programs. If you weren't going to be doing it otherwise, and this is a way in, more power to you. That's a step in the door, that's a step in the right direction, and it's revenue that you would not have otherwise received. So there's no harm, no foul, no reason not to do that. I want to thank you for taking the time to join our presentation today. Again, my name is Dean Schmidt. I'm the Sales Operations Manager here at DerbySoft. In our upcoming weeks of our series, as I mentioned earlier, we will be talking about budgeting for metasearch. It is that time of year where budgets and budget planning for 2017 are coming into play, and we'll conclude our four-part series with rate parity's impact on metasearch. I hope to hear you tune in and have you join us for those webinars. If you're watching this webinar as a replay, you will notice that there is a chat window at the bottom right-hand corner of your window, and you're welcome to type any messages in there. Those will be sent to us directly, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have for us. Thank you once again for your time, and I hope you have a great day.